Hey there, Jordan Sheridan live. Status Coup, Wednesday, February the 15th, the year 2023, right here in the United Corporations of America. We are staying on this train explosion in East Palestine, Ohio. Yeah, Kim Brown under the weather today. So it's me. You'll have to deal with me again. We have a jam-packed show, and we're staying on what I think is quite possibly going to be one of the biggest ecological disasters in modern history. I think we have the makings of a cover-up here that seem pretty familiar to me. In my experience dealing with the EPA and government and private corporations, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to react to some of the things Erin Brockovich said yesterday. It was awesome to interview her. She is a real force of nature. I actually have not had recently so many people reach out to me telling me, wow, that was amazing. People really liked that interview. So that we posted the whole interview with Erin Brockovich on its own last night. So definitely, if you missed the interview or even if you saw it on the live stream, go give it a click. That interview is up by itself. We also posted separately as its own video my interview with a mother of East Palestine, Ohio, who unfortunately her 9-year-old son had pretty volatile reaction right after the train fire started, even before the control release started, including violent shaking, projectile vomiting, among other things. And that clip, which is awesome, has on Twitter, it has 100,000 views already. So we're really getting this information out there. And frankly, I think doing a much better job in the corporate media, who seems to regurgitating whatever the hell the EPA and Norfolk Southern tell them. And welcome to new subscribers. We got a couple new subscribers in recent days. So I'm glad you're here. And welcome to the community. So let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start showing you a photo we got from a workplace right next to where the explosion was. And needless to say, this photo does not make it look like the water is okay in East Palestine. Then we're going to interview a resident. Part of the story that I want to get out there more is this is affecting a lot more people than just in the direct East Palestine area. This is affecting people as far as 15 miles down the road, 30 miles down the road. I've even seen 50 miles down the road. So we're going to talk to someone who is a resident 15 miles down the road who had pretty significant symptoms right after this controlled explosion, as they call it. Kyle and I just sent you that person's info for you to test with that person if need be. So we're going to speak with a resident who had some pretty big symptoms down the road. We are also going to air an interview I did with the former chief of staff of OSHA to kind of talk about vinyl chloride and why this is such a dangerous chemical that is spreading throughout East Palestine, Ohio, and frankly, to the east of it in Pennsylvania and to the west of it in other parts of Ohio. And we're also going to bring on Louis DeAngelis, a freelance reporter, because there was a derailment in Houston, Texas, since the derailment in Ohio. So we're going to get information on the derailment in Houston, which also had some toxins released. So a lot to get to. And just to give you an update, tonight is a town, they're calling it a town hall, but almost like an open house too. It's kind of weird. But there's a town hall in East Palestine, Ohio that starts at 7 o'clock Eastern, where residents are going to be able to, we hope, speak to their government, get questions answered from government, EPA. I am not optimistic that they are going to get full transparency, but we'll see. We are still waiting for the water testing results from the EPA. I can't report anything as fact, but I am hearing from sources that the water is going to test positive for contamination. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I'm hearing from a source I have. So we will see about that. And I find it highly dubious what they're saying, that they're not finding anything in the air as far as vinyl chloride, and they're not detecting anything in the air. We will play a clip from Erin Brockovich and what she said about that, because what she made the point of, it's possible that it will take a little longer for it to show up in the air. So that's why they need to do continued testing. And that's why it's kind of insane that they sent these people back home before they did thorough testing. Not one round of testing, but extensive testing. So smash that like button, share this live stream. The like button is right under the video. Sharing is caring, helps us get it out to more people. And please keep those super chats coming. We could really use your help. And if you appreciate the reporting we have been doing, consider signing up as a Status Coup member. That's statuscoup.com/join. statuscoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. $5 to $10 a month to support our journalism. And I am having conversations right now with Lewis about possibly sending him to East Palestine. So we most likely will be on the ground. I'm actually kind of waiting for the rest of the cameras to leave, which probably, let's be real, is going to happen in a few days, because media doesn't stay anywhere that long. Because to me, in my experience, the real story and the real cover-up begins when the rest of the media leaves and stops covering it. So we will update you on that. Colin, if you could bring up the photo that we were sent. So this is a photo. I'm not going to say what workplace, just to protect who we got it from, but that is a sink in a workplace right next to where the explosion was. I verified that that brown ring was not there before the train explosion. And the worker who sent this was one of several workers who was forced back to work the day after this train explosion and controlled release, and was feeling sick at work, including coughing and eyes burning. That is the sink at this workplace right next to where the train explosion happened. And the description that I was given from the worker was the water is literally white. So water is supposed to be kind of clear. Even if water is clear, you can have, if you could put it back up, Colin, you can still have contaminants in the water, even if the water is clear. But it was described to me that the water coming out is white and, quote, smells like wet dog. Smells like wet dog. So this happened February 3rd. We're February 15th now. That brown ring, that wasn't there before, from what I'm told. And the water, again, from what I was told, looks white and smells like wet dog. So we already know that rows and rows of fish, as many as 3,500 fish, have died in the Ohio River after this train explosion. We know coyotes and foxes have been sick. I interviewed a resident who lives about 9 miles from where the explosion was, whose fox died. And his other foxes, he's a fox keeper, and his other foxes and coyotes are ill and cognitively are having issues too. So the fish aren't dying from Kool-Aid. They're dying from the water. The animals, this person told me he's feeding his animals bottled water, which obviously could get expensive. But they're still breathing in whatever the hell is in the air. And like I said, one fox died and several of his other animals are sick. And at the vet, the blood tests for the animals showed elevated liver enzymes, high chloride levels, and lung inflammation. So, you know, I don't want to, we'll wait for the testing. As Erin Brockovich said yesterday, don't automatically trust the testing, because I've experienced the EPA and their testing integrity not be so great. But the picture is right there. That's a brown ring around the sink that was not there before the explosion. and a worker who is working right next to where the train exploded, saying that the water looks white and smells like wet dog. So it will be interesting to see what the EPA tells residents tonight at this town hall. Before we bring on our next guest, I want to play a few clips from Erin Brockovich, who was on yesterday, and react. If we could play the first one, Colin.
I'm sorry if I'm screaming. I'm so frustrated. It just dawned on me. I'm kind of screaming at you, and I don't mean to be.
I'm honored to be screamed at by Erin Brockovich.
For this community. This has been 30 years, and it's the same story, Jordan, over and over and over again. I don't know if they're expecting a different reaction or response, but it's complete and utter, a little too late, lack of transparency, failure on how to appropriately respond to a national disaster.
Right. And I haven't been going 30 years, but I've, in the last 6 years of covering Flint, it's eerily similar. I mean, you've been to Flint, you've been involved in justice for Flint. They literally were telling residents, don't believe your lying skin, don't believe your lying brown water. Don't believe your eyes.
Right.
Your water's fine. You got rows of dead fish. I interviewed somebody, his fox died, other foxes, coyotes are sick. The blood tests on those animals showed elevated liver enzymes, chloride, lung inflammation. So if that's happening to the animals, what's happening to the humans? And
absolutely. And why is that not being reported at a national level? I mean, this is a great conversation for us to have. This always feels like a huge gaslight. I don't know a word to use on these communities. Oh, that's right. What you're seeing, this takes me back to my days in Hinckley, California. Oh, Aaron, the two-headed frog in green water that you see isn't real. And then it makes us question ourselves. And it's like, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, no, what I am seeing is real. And I'm going to validate and stand with every community that is the persons in the disaster that is experiencing it. Believe me, they're not lying. And for whatever reason, I don't know why these agencies don't want to hear from we the people as to what's happening to them, to us, in a situation like this on the ground. They're there, these agencies in DC, and not everyone's stepping out there to find out for themselves. And so there's a moment here, I wrote this in my book, Superman's Not Coming. These crises have gone on way too long. And Jordan, we're going to have another one. But we've got to stop thinking or being comfortable or complacent. And I say that because sometimes in my life, I too have become comfortable or complacent, or thought that these entities, agencies, and leaders who were in place were in fact going to take care of us. But we're learning more often than not. It's a cover-up. It's not transparent. They're not forthwith. They don't have our back. So my hope is still in, as it was in the people of Flint and the people of East Palestine, who are going to doggedly stick with this story, speak up, speak out, ask the necessary questions. And yes, I think they ask the best ones. Citizens.
So that whole interview is up there. So definitely check it out, share it so we can get it out to more people. I'm about to bring on a guest that lives 15 miles away and was experiencing health symptoms. So we're not really seeing in the media, as far as I can tell. Obviously, the focus needs to be on East Palestine residents who are right in the blast radius. I haven't seen a lot of focus on the fact that there are people who have had symptoms, within 10 miles, 15 miles. I've talked to people who have had symptoms 30, 40 miles away. And by the way, Norfolk Southern is going to fight like hell once this major class action lawsuit happens to narrow the area of who is considered victims. Probably going to try to narrow it to, a mile or so of the blast radius. So that's going to be a big battle of who is considered in the affected area. And that is where it is so critical that the testing is done right. And Erin Brockovich has been tweeting out today, we need independent testing, because contrary to the narrative that the EPA went to shit under Trump, the EPA was shit before Trump too. It just got worse. And unfortunately, we have an EPA, in my view, a CDC, and other agencies that exist to protect business rather than public health first. That doesn't mean everybody who works in the EPA sucks and is nefarious. I'm not saying that. However, I know from reporting in Flint, the EPA has knowingly accepted manipulated testing from state environmental outlets. I have EPA sources who have told me, yeah, I know they cheated on the testing, but there's nothing I could do. And, they just kind of want to sweep this under the rug as far as Flint. So just because the EPA is giving the all clear on the air, they say they tested nearly 500 homes and they're not detecting any vinyl chloride or other chemicals in the air yet, doesn't make it 100% take that to the bank. And common sense, if you're not detecting anything in the air, then why are people's eyes burning? Why are people having sore throats? Why are people projectile vomiting, which a mother I interviewed yesterday shared about her son? Why are people violently shaking? And others are having more extreme symptoms. So let me invite on Therese. You are from Polio, Ohio, is it?
Poland.
Poland, excuse me. So you live about 15 miles away from where this happened.
Yes.
So let's start with, how'd you hear about that this train had derailed? And were people in your area 15 miles away getting communication on the fact that they were going to basically do like a controlled explosion or controlled release, as they call it?
Our local news did run a story about it on Friday when it happened. There really wasn't a lot of excitement about it. It almost like not a lot of people really knew about it. It was just our two local news stations. And then, I'm trying to think. By Monday, when they rolled around, it did sound like they had a solid plan to get rid of the chemical without it endangering the public.
Gotcha. So talk to me about when did you first start noticing anything in terms of your own health? Anyone in your family? Was it pretty quick after they did this control burn? Because it was on February 3rd that this happened.
The controlled release began on February 6th, which was Monday. It was towards the end of the day, probably, I think it was like between 4 and 5 o'clock is when they initially started doing it. And then the explosion happened. So it was after dinner time, probably around 6 o'clock, 6:30. I was outside having my coffee like I do every night after dinner. And I didn't notice a smell in the air, and I didn't even expect to smell anything being 15 miles away. But I did notice that my coffee tasted unusually bitter. I didn't think anything of it. A little bit later, I was back out on my porch, and coffee still tasting bitter. And then I noticed my lips started feeling numb. The roof of my mouth started feeling numb. My tongue started burning, and my throat started burning.
Wow.
At that point, I went in the house and I got my husband and I said, come out here and smell the air. I said, because I think it smells funny. I could smell a burning smell, but it wasn't leaves or twigs or wood or anything like that. It had more of like a chemical odor to it. So he came out, he took a big breath in. He said, yeah, I smell something out there. He said it smelled like burning electronics.
And are you in Poland 15 miles away on well water?
Yes.
Okay. So how much, I don't know if you remember, but did you drink like the whole coffee or was it a little bit of the coffee before you had that?
I drank a cup the first time I was out. I drank another cup the second time I was out. I am a caffeine addict.
Okay.
And then this proceeded 2, maybe 3 more times throughout the night. I would go out, experience the symptoms, come back in, and they would dissipate. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, because it wasn't sticking once I went back in the house, like the symptoms would just dissipate. The next morning when I woke up and I experienced the same type of symptoms, but it was a little bit less intense. And at that point, I had like my tongue just was fried by the time I woke up the next morning. It felt like I had been scalded, like my tongue was scalded, like if you drank like a hot liquid that was just too hot, or you know what I'm saying?
Mhm. And
And that lasted all of last week.
this was the next morning.
Yes.
And how long did that last for?
It was like the texture of my tongue was horrible. It was scaly. It felt very rough, discolored, and very dry. And I still have a very dry mouth. It seemed to improve by the end of the week, to the point where it's not uncomfortable feeling at this point, but I still have a very odd taste in my mouth that I can't describe because I've never tasted this before in my life.
Wow. And did it you said your tongue, but did it affect your throat or anything else?
Yeah, my throat is still irritated at this point.
Wow. So with these symptoms, what do you do? I mean, have you went to the doctor or asked the doctor if this could, I mean, it's obviously it didn't come out of nowhere,
Right.
But what have you been doing for it?
I have an appointment with my doctor tomorrow. I'm going in to get everything checked out, get a blood test done, get my liver enzymes examined. I wasn't able to do that sooner because I had to go out of state Tuesday evening with my son, which he comes first.
Yep.
And again, I thought everything was harmless. I was watching what the news was saying, what the EPA was saying. They said everything's fine, don't worry about it. But I mean, I'm listening to my body, and my body was telling me there's something is absolutely not right.
Right. And what do you think? Because the governor yesterday was asked if he would go home if he lived in East Palestine, and you're not in East Palestine, you're 15 miles away. And he kind of gave like well, you know, I drink bottled water, but I think so. And I don't know. I don't live there, but it wasn't exactly a comforting answer.
Exactly.
It seems like they basically have sent the people that live there home before all testing is done. And I haven't really seen much talked about or outreach done to the parts of Pennsylvania east that have been affected, or in your case, I don't know if you're west or south.
I'm up like north.
Okay. But it doesn't seem like there's much of communication or a plan for folks outside of East Palestine, because I'm not an expert, but I don't know, it could be a chemical burn that you experience. I don't know, but
that's what I believe. Because as I talked to you in our communication prior to right now, I did experience the gastrointestinal bleeding, which I believe was because of the coffee that was like oddly bitter. I think whatever was in the air got into the coffee, because there's no other reason for me to have experienced something like that.
You were also experiencing bleeding, gastro?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's obviously, I assume you haven't been drinking as much coffee from the well since?
You know what? It's been fine since I came back from Florida. The air seems fine where we are. I tested our water today. Nothing's coming back weird with our water. But we are drinking bottled water just as a precaution. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you tested the water?
They're not paying attention to the outlying areas because I think they're so focused on where the chemicals spilled and where the explosion was. They're not paying attention to where that cloud of chemicals went, because it not only did it get to where I live 15 miles away, but it also traveled into the northern area of the county above where I live.
Right. And it's kind of you're a citizen, you want to trust your government, but we're dealing with a corporation here. Right. Obviously, they are facing potentially hundreds of millions, if not into the billion, in terms of liability. And obviously they're going to want to push this narrative that this is only affecting people in the immediate area, but you never know. I mean, you might, for you, it could be you consumed some of the water or breathed in the air and it was a short-term thing, but not long-term problems. But for a neighbor of yours who's immunocompromised, it could really be a long-term issue.
Right.
Yeah. Have you talked to anyone else in the area that have had any symptoms?
There's kind of like an underground communication going on behind the scenes on Facebook. My people like myself, as well as a lot of others, we've been the targets of nasty, like troll type people with fake accounts. This happened to me the night of the explosion. I was commenting on our local news's Facebook just to see if anyone else was having symptoms. And I had 2 men come at me, just saying horrible, horrible things, making it sound like I was crazy or something. And I said, I'm not going to post anything publicly because I don't want that. And I am not the type of person that I'm going to make things up and try to include myself in a situation that didn't actually affect me. So I've been keeping in touch with a handful of people in Poland and also in Boardman, Ohio, which is 5 minutes west of where I live. And we've been discussing things. They're having similar symptoms as I did. And it was due to the exposure on Monday night when
Gotcha.
the controlled release happened.
Well, I'm glad from the sounds of it, I'm glad at least it's dissipated a little bit. I hope
Yes.
I hope your blood work comes back normal and all those things. And I've seen in these instances, sometimes kind of residents and activists could kind of turn on each other. And I've certainly seen the trolls you deal with. It's always something when people who don't live in the place affected are telling you're crazy. It's fine. It's really arrogant and insulting. But
yes.
I'm glad we got in touch, because I think a bigger part of this story is we're going to have to walk and chew gum and, focus on the people there that have been affected, obviously, in East Palestine, but also realize that there might be a much wider radius of people that are affected. So please keep in touch. I hope you're well. And I'm glad I'm not the only one drinking 5 cups of coffee a day. Take care.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. So she was in Poland, Ohio, which is 15 miles away. So that's some serious shit. I mean, your tongue is basically burning and your throat hurts. And not to be graphic, but you're talking about blood in the stool, pooping and blood. That I hope is a temporary thing for her, but I wanted to have her on because I have not seen as much. It's a tough balancing act. You want to focus on the people in East Palestine, but you want to make sure people realize and kind of push against the narrative that it's only people there. I mean, I'm hearing people as far as Pittsburgh, which is obviously east of East Palestine. They're having symptoms. We're hearing west of East Palestine. She's north. So it's just terrible. We're trying to cover as many angles as we can. Definitely, if you're new here, subscribe. We posted the full interview with Erin Brockovich. We posted the full interview with the mother, whose son, unfortunately, had a really bad reaction after the train fire, projectile vomiting, violent shaking. We've interviewed a fox keeper. One of his foxes died. Others are sick. So there's a whole lot going on. So smash that like button. We're going to bring on Louis DeAngelis in a few minutes, but I first wanted to, and if you're coming to this late, I want to show you an image we got. If we could put that image back up, Colin. This is what we got from a workplace right next to the train explosion. So this is I don't want to say where, because I got to protect my source, but this is a worker who works pretty much right next to where the train explosion happened. This worker, shocking, in the United Corporations of America, was forced to go back to work the next day after this train explosion, felt sick at work. That ring was not there before this train explosion. And it was described to me that the water looks white. Water is supposed to be clear. Even clear water, by the way, could have problems. I mean, you could have lead. Lead doesn't show up in water. So your water could be clear and still have lead, but good water is supposed to be clear. White water, there's some shit in that water if it's white. And he said it smells like a wet dog. So I am very much looking forward to the EPA's results, because those 3,500 fish are not dying from ingesting Kool-Aid. And yeah, this is horrible. I'm seeing in the chat something about the town hall being canceled. I haven't heard that yet. So actually, I'm talking to someone. Oh, I'm hearing Norfolk Southern pulled out of the town hall. Shocking. Hold on. We're doing it live, folks. Okay. Yeah. Viewers were telling me it was canceled. I guess it was actually Norfolk Southern bailing out. So it wasn't canceled, but the company responsible for this has bailed out. So what does that tell you? Corporations gonna protect their own ass. And by the way, Norfolk Southern is one. It's just one rail. Warren Buffett owns most of the railways in this country. They all lobbied and spent God knows how much money to fight a regulation that would make them have to spend a little money to update their rail system, to update their brakes on the train, because the brakes on this rail that derailed and most others are from the Civil War era. Yes, the Civil War era. So let's play another interview, because I want to get a little bit more information on vinyl chloride, as well as the workplace element of this. So I spoke with a former higher up at OSHA, who is not a toxicologist, but knows a little bit about vinyl chloride. Let's play a little bit of this. Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Debbie Berkowitz. You were the chief of staff with OSHA and a senior policy advisor back under the Obama administration. So you know a lot about what's supposed to happen with workplace safety. And obviously, there's a lot more attention over the last few days to what's going on in East Palestine, Ohio, in the aftermath of this train explosion and the controlled release, as they're calling it. So first, I wanted to ask you, when you were with OSHA, were there times when we had these kinds of derailments with similar chemicals like vinyl chloride released into the air, or is this fairly unusual?
So I don't actually remember whether there were train explosions like this. But there are a couple of things I do know. That OSHA has very strong regulations to protect workers from vinyl chloride exposure. Most of that exposure has to do with inhalation exposure and not from drinking water, which I know is also a concern. But these chemicals that were released into the air are really toxic. And to protect workers, at OSHA, we have very, very low levels of exposure that workers are allowed to be exposed to vinyl chloride, because OSHA regulates it because it has the potential to cause cancer. And in fact, part of the OSHA regulations require companies to post a sign in work areas where workers would be exposed to vinyl chloride that says this chemical may cause cancer. So you need to wear your respirator. You need to be protected. I mean, OSHA regulates vinyl chloride. Yeah, chemicals in the air in the workplace are measured in parts per million. So vinyl chloride, workers can only be exposed to 1 part per million. That's one. If there's 1 million parts of air, only 1 part of it could be vinyl chloride over an 8-hour workday. And requirements trigger in at 0.5 parts per million. But if workers were going to, instead of try to figure out whether they were exposed or not by whether they can smell vinyl chloride, they would already be in trouble, because I don't think vinyl chloride, you can smell it till it's 3,000 parts per million. Wow. So the fact that people can smell chemicals in their houses is a little worrisome. And, it's really important that there be monitoring wherever people are in confined spaces. so that they make sure that these chemicals have dissipated. And I think, government figures have to be honest with people. I mean, in short term, it can cause, vinyl chloride can cause sort of respiratory distress, that if you get somebody out of the area very quickly, it should dissipate. But long term, it causes all sorts of health hazards. It attacks the central nervous system. If you have building up toxicity, so if you've been exposed to a while, for a while, and the real thing is that in addition to looking, affecting the central nervous system, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the International Agency for Research on Cancer have classified vinyl chloride as a known human carcinogen. So for OSHA, when the standard that's required for employers is not only are there signs plastered all over the workplace to warn workers about the dangers of vinyl chloride, but also companies have to do medical monitoring to make sure that the small amounts that workers are exposed to are not causing long-term health effects. And, that's how dangerous it is.
Mm-hmm. And can I ask you, obviously you're not a toxicologist, but this from the EPA update sparked my interest. This was yesterday they updated. I'll read it to you. They say, after the fire was extinguished on February 8th, the threat of vinyl chloride fire producing phosgene and hydrogen chloride no longer exists. So in English, it seems like they're saying after the fire is out, the threat of vinyl chloride producing, additional gases no longer exists. That sounds funky to me. I find that hard to believe, particularly since we're seeing reports of people having eyes burning, sore throat, coughing, not just in the immediate zone, but as far as 20, 25 miles away. Is the EPA statement there? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that vinyl chloride itself exposure can cause these kinds of health effects. So vinyl chloride gas inhalation can cause mild respiratory tract irritation, wheezing, and chemical bronchitis. And also central nervous system, like headaches, kind of damage. So, I can't tell you whether there's still phosgene, which is also a toxic substance being released, but vinyl chloride itself is very dangerous. And it's, OSHA doesn't regulate a whole lot of chemicals just because it's a very small agency. But this was one of the first ones that OSHA, back when it was created in the 70s, really took a look at updating its protections because of how dangerous it was. And, I think, long-term damage can cause permanent liver injury and cancer. And, these things don't show up till later. So, and vinyl chloride can irritate the eyes, the mucous membranes, the respiratory tract. So, I think it's really important that there be a lot of monitoring going on, and that, this is dangerous. And I really feel for the people in this community and the surrounding community. They need to be protected, and the companies need to be stepping forward, as well as, the state government and the federal government.
And just from a common sense perspective, does it make sense that you would tell residents to go back home while testing is going on? I mean, isn't that kind of like, wouldn't you want to evacuate the immediate zone until not just one round of testing, but, potentially weeks of testing is done? The governor yesterday kind of was like, well, if it were me, I'd go home, but maybe do bottled water. It just seems like they're sending people back without testing being done.
These chemicals are really dangerous. And I would think, you want to be most protective than saying, oh, I think it's going to be okay. I think you need to do a lot more monitoring so the community can feel safe. That's how I'd approach it if this was a workplace hazard. I wouldn't send workers back in, oh, we think we cleared everything, and today at 8 o'clock, there wasn't a whole lot of vinyl chloride. But let's wait and see what happens at 5 o'clock or the next day before you start sending everybody back.
Right. And as far as the workplace regulations, obviously, President Obama actually pushed a regulation for trains that would make them update their brake system because, we're talking Civil War era equipment here. That was repealed under President Trump. And in this case, we believe that's part of what happened here, where the brake system was inadequate. As far as I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of other trains carrying these chemicals in addition to other toxic chemicals that are not up to date and possibly could have further derailments.
Yeah, I think it was so short-sighted of the Trump administration, to repeal these regulations, which in the end may cost the rails company some money now, but look at the money they're spending later, or actually now, for the disasters they've caused. And it's going to be a long time before this is all cleaned up. We used to have a saying when I was at OSHA that OSHA regulations don't kill jobs, they prevent, jobs from killing workers. And it's the same with these kind of environmental regulations, is they don't kill jobs, they just prevent the environment from killing you so you can work. And I think it's very short-sighted. And I think this is the result of when you cut back. And, I think often companies, the first thing they cut is things about safety. And that's why you need government regulations.
And lastly, for the residents there who have been complaining about lack of transparency, they're not getting kind of straight answers. The governor's giving one answer, the EPA a different answer. What would be your recommendations for residents? Should they seek, independent water testing if they could afford it? What should they do? Because we know in Flint there were issues with, some cherry picking of data, some manipulation of data. I don't want to, accuse the EPA of doing that, but there's been, not only in Flint but elsewhere, some creative data gathering when it comes to water, air.
Well, I trust this administration to do the right thing in terms of federal EPA. But I also agree with the interview I heard with Erin Brockovich that people need answers and there should be a lot more monitoring. And people need to see that monitoring and understand the monitoring. And I know, if you haven't been in the field of toxicology and chemicals, it's all sort of, hard to wrap your brain around. But these are really dangerous chemicals. Right. Like super dangerous chemicals that if they were in the workplace, it would raise a million red flags as all of a sudden there was a leak. So I think people need a lot more information, and the government should spend money doing the testing. And I thought I heard the governor of Ohio this morning say if people don't want to return, that the company will pay for them to stay, elsewhere, still in a motel. And if that's true, they should, people may want to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Debbie Berkowitz. You were Chief of Staff with OSHA and a Senior Policy Advisor. You're now a fellow at the Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor over at Georgetown University. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
So that was former OSHA Chief of Staff. Agree with her on a lot of things, but I will say for myself, I do not trust this administration. I also do not trust the EPA. And that's not to sound like a complete conspiracy theorist, because there's plenty of good people at the EPA. I have, in reporting for Flint, I won't get into sources, but I do know good people at the EPA who try to do the good thing. Unfortunately, they're not the ones making decisions. And the EPA is known to, and you saw it from the EPA chief, who's done interviews today on CNN and other networks. They like to kind of use state agencies as cover and be behind the scenes as secondary and say, well, the state EPA in Ohio or Michigan is taking the lead. And if you know your history, a lot of these state environmental departments like to cherry pick testing, manipulate testing, cheat on testing, toss out certain high tests that would screw their averages, because, you know, you have to get below a certain level for whatever it is, whether it's lead or other contaminants. And if you have X amount of high tests, agencies have been caught tossing out tests. You would hope in the case of a chemical mushroom cloud over the heartland of America, they wouldn't do that. And they would be honest if the air is polluted, if the water is polluted, and relocate people. But it's all about the money. And we do live in the United Corporations of America. Joining me now is Louis DeAngelis from Texas, freelance journalist who's done God's work for us. And this is also now not your first rodeo, because you've been down at Jackson. You covered for us the Jackson water crisis, which is still ongoing in Mississippi. So you're familiar with, shall we say, the credulous credibility of water testing and government agencies.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I've still been keeping in touch with a couple of folks in Jackson, and I did a video a couple of weeks back. I mean, there are different pockets. Sure, the whole city is not under a boil water notice right now, but every other day and week in a lot of these cases, different pockets of the city will be under a boil water notice for a couple days, and then they'll be like, okay, your water's fine now, but now this part is wrong. So obviously when that's happening, regardless of where you live in the city, you're going to be questioning whether or not to drink it. And basically everybody that I've stayed in touch with from there is still on the bottled water grind at this point, unfortunately, because they've got no reason to believe the water authority, their local government, the state government. Yeah. So no, I don't have as much experience as you over here in all of this, but I'm learning from one of the best here. So yeah.
Why, thank you. Colin, I actually, before we get to the Houston derailment, because Louis has information about another issue with chemical exposure. Do we have Erin Brockovich? I don't know which clip it is, so maybe we'll just have to play a few. She mentioned why she thought the EPA testing might be dubious. I don't know. I think that was one of those that I posted on Twitter. If you have that one, Colin. This is definitely not your first rodeo, not my first rodeo. EPA testing is often, if you want to give it the benefit of the doubt, flawed or not totally thorough. Do you trust? I mean, maybe they're not detecting it now, but what do you think of their claims that they're not detecting it?
I don't trust. In all fairness, it is going to take some time to do all of this testing. Now, some of the reports I've read that the EPA initiated yesterday, they're almost talking out of two sides of their mouth, because they state it's a known toxic substance, vinyl chloride, and it's known and continues to be known that it's leaking into the water, into the air, and into the soil. Okay, so we have that side of their story. But then over here they go, well, we tested the homes. I've read where they didn't find any detection limit within the limits that they're supposed to be looking for. Well, that says to me, that doesn't mean you didn't find it.
Right.
But that's safe to go back. Which is it? So it's really frustrating that the agencies can't get it together, have a consistent story, because you're creating your lack of response and the way you are responding. Giveth, taketh away. Well, it's here, but it's not dangerous. Well, it is a hazardous chemical, but you can go home. Creates more confusion, certainly creates the conspiracy conversation to go on, or the conversation that you shouldn't be trusted, or you're not doing your job. God forbid anybody speak up and say, where the hell are you? Where is consistent information? Are you down on the ground with these people? Why are you, their leader, is not communicating with them? Why, Jordan, do I hear from them and you hear from them? Because somebody's not answering their questions. And this community, as all communities, deserve more respect than that from their local, state, and federal leaders, and stepping up to the plate. And by God, if you don't know what's happening,
Is she not a fucking badass? Holy cow.
I know. I was watching that yesterday and I was just, oh man. Yeah.
And you know, it's funny. My dad, who's a Trumper, but that's neither here or there.
Mine
he
is
called,
too. So
he called me and he's like, you know, that Erin Brockovich, I think she should be your co-host. I think that would take your business to the next level. I said, yeah, I'll call Erin Brockovich. I'm sure she wants to be my co-host. Anyway, but I think a point she made is important. So it's like, I don't know, you know, just think of health. Like, well, the doctor tells you your blood levels, like your vitamin D is within the range, but the healthy range, but it could be on the low end of that range. So she's making the point that even if they're saying the vinyl chloride levels are within the range, that doesn't mean they're not detecting vinyl chloride.
Any of them. And then, I mean, to her point that she made there, and then the interview of the woman you just had on before me, not the EPA person, but the resident who lived 15 miles or so away, the kind of response in general from the government. I mean, that woman heard about it from the like local TV station. The fact that like, I mean, with something like this, you got to be going like door to door to make sure, like, you can't just assume everyone's going to be watching their local news station to find out that something 15 miles away from their house could, you know, cause half their town to have cancer in a few years. That seems like something that'd be more urgent, that you need to go knock on the door. The messaging's been all over the place with this instance. And I mean, we've seen it with a bunch of crises at this point, whether I'm sure it was the case in Flint, even when you look at like things like COVID and things like that, the messaging and like the having one clear, this is what's actually happening, this is what folks need to do, seems to never happen with any of these issues.
Right. And also, I mean, there's also CYA going on, which is cover your ass.
Right.
Because while the EPA, while Governor Mike DeWine, I'm sure people in Biden's administration are having press conferences and acting like, you know, we just, you know, we're going to hold the company accountable, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. They are also trying to figure out who knew what when. You know, why wasn't this regulation reinstated that might have prevented this in terms of the brakes, and what happened right after? Because it seems like the decision to even do a controlled release probably was not the right decision. Right. And if you were going to do that, you should have evacuated way more than a mile. But
definitely.
I digress. And just to update people who are in the chat, the town hall tonight, which is at 7:00 in East Palestine, is not canceled. However, the courageous souls at Norfolk Southern have bailed. So obviously they knew they were going to be human piñatas at this town hall.
Right. So the people who all of the government officials are essentially relying on Norfolk Southern for the water testing quality reports and the air testing stuff, they're not going to be there to answer about it.
Right. And you know what? One more time, Lewis, I lied. Can we play Colin and smash that like button? We got 300 people watching. Let's get more people. So press the like button, and super chats are welcome. I'll read them at the end. Let me give a shout out also, because we got a couple new members. Status Coup is primarily an on the ground reporting outlet. We're going to probably send Lewis, who's on with me right now, to East Palestine. So we definitely need your support. Welcome William and Natasha signed up as new Status Coup members. So sign up, statuscoup.com/join. You could become a member and support our independent on the ground reporting for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Normally I would be out in one of these situations, but I have a 3-month-old and I want to stay married. So I'm not going to East Palestine, but Lewis is a little younger than I and can go. But we actually were going to send you over the weekend, and then I texted you at 2 a.m, I think, to tell you I thought about it, and I don't want to put you in harm's way because I'm a good guy like that. So we wanted to wait a little bit because honestly, I don't think it's safe for the residents to be there, much less journalists right now. But we're probably going to send you soon because honestly, the real cover-up happens when all the cameras leave. That's when the cover-up happens, and usually the media leaves after about 4 or 5 days. So anyway, let's play. Governor Mike DeWine was on CNN this morning, who basically had a pillow party with him, didn't challenge him at all. But let's see what the governor of Ohio had to say.
First off, we're sorry that you're having to deal with this. The residents are having to deal with this. My question straight off to you is, can you say with absolute certainty that the residents of East Palestine are safe?
Well, what we're trying to do is provide them every day with the information. And we started testing, the air. The air has remained good. We will continue to test every single day. Even when the controlled release was done, we told people in a certain area they needed to leave. And outside that area, we never saw really a significant change in the air at all. But we're going to continue to do that. As far as the water, the fish that were killed, very soon after the initial train crash occurred. We continue to monitor the water in different streams as it goes out. And we did get a test back late yesterday of the water in the village. And the first well that we tested the water was fine. We expect to get the next results back today. We'll make those available as well. Out of abundance of caution, we told people and have told people, yes, use a bottle of water. Don't take a chance. Wait until
sounds
we
like you're
get
saying you're not sure that they're safe,
the
Governor.
test back. Look, what I said yesterday, I would be back there if I was living in the community. Look, we're doing testing with the air. The air has been safe. It continues to be safe.
Okay.
Well, wait, hold on. Let me interrupt. Actually, I don't think I need to go anymore, Jordan. It sounds like the water is good and the air is fine.
Yeah, the air has remained good. Well, tell that to all the residents whose eyes are burning, whose throat is burning, whose tongue is scalding. That was a woman 15 miles away who is pooping out blood, unfortunately, and is dizzy, projectile vomiting.
No, it's good. It's good. That's
violently shaking. This kind of reminds me, if you're in Michigan in the chat, let me know if you remember this. But Rick Snyder said he was going to do a 30-day drinking Flint water, and he put up Flint water and said which was definitely not Flint water. But this kind of reminds me of that. I don't know how you say that if you are not there, if you're not drinking the water, and I don't know what is your standard for the air is good. Yeah, Marcy, you're in Flint, so you know what I'm talking about. This is all for show. These are wealthy white men, Snyder, who should be in jail, by the way, but that's a different story. They don't live there and seem, go there for photo ops or a press conference and then leave. But I find it insane to say the air is good, as Aaron Brockovich said. Well, your testing might not be showing hazardous levels, but that doesn't mean you didn't detect levels of vinyl chloride. Secondly, what makes, what's hazardous, what's not hazardous to you might destroy me if you're immunocompromised. And thirdly, he's, to our aquatic friends, very casually talking about the dead fish, it was just 3,500. Well, what did the fish die of? You're saying the water testing hasn't come back. They didn't die of Kool-Aid. So I don't know. I don't care if you're a Republican, but if you live in Ohio, I would not be feeling confident after hearing from the governor.
Agreed. And I mean, hopefully people are hearing that. But in listening again to the woman you had on earlier today and the interview that I did, which will probably come out at some point here, he also said a lot of people in that kind of range of 15, 20 miles away who were definitely affected by the controlled release explosion are definitely going to be affected. And the person I talked to said that a lot of folks had no idea that this was happening still. If you don't have a lot of people don't have regular cable anymore. So if you're doing YouTube TV or Hulu or one of these other streaming service for live TV, you don't get local news. And we know how long it took for national news to start covering it. If no one was knocking on your door and you're not a news junkie or scrolling through Twitter or TikTok or something, you had no idea that this happened.
Right.
Yeah. That's
so, and we're going to air, we're going to post, Lewis did an interview with a resident. We're going to post that tomorrow. Before we get to Houston, before we came live, Colin, do you have that video from, I think it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma? This is a fire broke out at a chemical tank that leads to temporary evacuations. Do you have that, Colin? Yeah. So that's Tulsa. I don't know what the hell's coming out of there, but that's a chemical plant. So I'm sure that's all dandy. The Tulsa Port Authority says an oil chemical tanker at the port of Catoosa has caught fire, causing evacuations on site and the nearby businesses. Residents are asked to shelter in place until the situation is under control. Officials say chemical fire seems to be contained to the port only. Yeah, it's always contained very quickly. And then, you know, the people that have cancer and all that are, you know, whatever. This was after yesterday, there was something in Tucson, Arizona. I think, was it
a tractor trailer crash on the highway? I've got it written down here. It was it leaked out a bunch of nitric acid, which you know, causes issues with your eyes, your skin, mucous membranes, lungs. It can lead to like some real severe damage. They had to evacuate. I think this is just from one truck, so this also gives like some perspective of, you know, how much you can fit on a truck versus how much is on this train in East Palestine. With this one truck, I believe they had a half a mile radius that they immediately evacuated as many people as they could, basically, from one truck spilling. Multiply that by however many train cars there were in East Palestine. Not to discount the issue going on in Arizona there, but yeah, I mean, this is a big deal.
And now let's get to Houston, which is Oil Town, USA.
Yeah.
Some of the most corrupt fucking aristocrat, plutocrat scumbags, no offense, in the world. Not the residents, just the oil men, the Bushes, etc. But Houston, there was a derailment. You sent Colin some stuff.
Yeah. We have a clip, Colin. If you want to just pull up the clip, there's no audio to it, so I can kind of explain a little bit what's going on while the clip is. Oh, maybe there is some. Are we able to just mute that audio or no? I have no idea. Oh. Alrighty, so yeah, you can see here this actually happened 7:30 in the morning on Monday. A train in just outside of Houston actually hit a tractor trailer. It caused that to derail. 16 cars came off. The initial reports, which conveniently came from the railroad company, is CSX in this case, said nothing was leaking off of the train cars or anything at this point. There was a diesel spill that happened, but reportedly that's from the tractor trailer that was hit. I did see some reports. No one is like kind of continuous, like, you know, piecing all of this together necessarily, that there were some chemicals actually on board the train, but it sounded more like it was potentially like household chemicals. My guess is, just by like putting two and two together, looking at this, you can obviously see it's mostly like shipping containers and whatnot that were involved here. It literally could have been like household cleaners or something being transported in one of these. But fortunately, in this case, again, kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, because apparently the United States government or local agencies or anything don't want to dive into what is actually inside of the train. So we have to rely on what CSX is telling us. Yeah, this is kind of another big issue that happened here. I'm sorry, can you guys still hear me? It looks like,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so the leak of the diesel, though, was somewhere in the range of 1 to 200 gallons of diesel that spilled. Ordinarily, like, so I looked into this quite a bit, because this one is very preventable, and like basically there was no crossing arm at this railroad crossing here. So ordinarily you would see the normal thing with the flashing lights, crossing arm come down when a train comes. There was nothing here. And the intersection that it happened on was kind of a funky one, where you're kind of coming out of this industrial area. One of the reports that I found, and I looked in like a Facebook group and saw some more about this, that the tractor trailer pulling out was actually carrying a modular home. So this is like a pretty big kind of oversized load that was hit here, which probably led more to the collision, because ordinarily when a train hits a car or something, derailments don't necessarily happen. But when they hit bigger things, a tractor trailer, the chances of it happening go up. But in any case, having some sort of crossing arm here would have prevented this. I did some looking into crossing arms, because obviously there's a chance that, fortunately in this case, again, it doesn't look like there was, as many chemicals on board in a situation like we're seeing in East Palestine. But there are, let me see if I can find my number here. There are 210,000 at-grade railroad crossings in the United States on a mix of private and public land. 129,000 of them are on public roads. and only a third of them have railroad crossing gates. So only a third of the almost 130,000 railroad crossings in the United States have a crossing gate. There's no special regulation on if hazardous trains are going through this area that they need to have a gate or anything like that. And also what was really interesting to me was that despite the fact that in most cases the railroads own the railroad lines, they obviously own the trains that are moving the goods across. The person who actually pays for the railroad crossing gates is state and local governments most of the time, not the railroads, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me when it's like the stretches of railroad that are going across the road are usually just like a right of way for the railroad to go through. So it seems like, obviously this is not what caused the derailment issue in Ohio, but to kind of tie this back into that, this is clearly a way that trains can be derailed and have this issue that happened in Ohio potentially happen in your small town near you. And the railroad company isn't paying for the crossing equipment to go in. Your local government, state government, federal government doesn't have any regulations that say that there has to be a crossing guard. In this case, there was just a yield sign. And this guy's driving a big truck pulling out. The intersection looked a little funny, especially if you were in a big truck, like it would be kind of a complicated one to kind of navigate in and out of. So his first thought or her first, it was a man driving the truck actually. And he unfortunately passed away. Your first thought isn't a train's going to come barreling through and hit me as I pull out of here. But unfortunately, that's exactly what happened here. We have all of these, like I said, 129,000 crossings on public roads, only a third have crossing gates. This seems like one small step in addition to requiring updating braking systems. Like you said, the braking systems haven't changed since the Civil War era. Which is absolutely insane. It's not that the new technology doesn't exist. It's that the government doesn't have the backbone to force the rail industry to actually update their trains to this. Mayor Pete, rather than focusing on trying to actually get out here and do something good in his role as the Department of Transportation Secretary, he's out at ribbon cutting ceremonies. He was at a meeting this week. I have it written down. Where is it? It was at like a group of like county executives essentially from across the country. And he was speaking to them this week about having equity in the construction companies that are working on infrastructure in your town, which is an important thing. And I think should be there, but there was zero mention of the Ohio train derailment, of any of the other derailments that happened. The highways fall under transportation. The truck accident in Arizona wasn't mentioned at all. Because
all the people who get cancer will really be happy with, ramping up the diversity in transportation.
You got cancer, but at least the railroad was fixed by a diverse group of people.
Yes, it's unbelievable. Yeah. And by the way, I mean, you're in Austin, but we're talking about Houston. Texas, I learned this when I covered the Trans-Pecos pipeline many moons ago down there. Kind of the railroads run the government. The oil companies and the railroad industry kind of run the show. In Texas, there's not regulations is more a theoretical exercise in Texas.
It's a weird thing. They're very tied together too. The railroad commissioner also regulates the oil industry in the state. Like it's literally like one elected body does both. Which is bizarre. I hadn't heard of that until when I moved here almost 2 years ago now, kind of looking into voting here. It's like the railroad commissioner. It seems like an odd state level thing to be voting for. But yeah, they have a lot of control over the oil industry in the state as well, which is, I mean, it's interesting. Another point here that I want to make is that right now to tie it into to more broadly, this isn't my expertise, but folks like you and Tina are kind of covering a lot of this stuff. Like right now, what I'm seeing is the federal government and even state governments are hyper focused on policing ordinary people like you and me and everybody else. But when it comes to policing these massive corporations and the railroads and all these other things, it's just you guys, we need to focus on you and police everyday people. But these corporations, they can handle themselves. They'll be good. They're fine. They don't need anyone regulating or policing them at all.
Well, why is that, Lewis? Why do you think that is? Because we live in the United Corporations of America, the flag behind me. God damn it, I wish it was our flag because we would be a lot more wealthy as a company. because we could sell a lot of them, but it is not our flag. Another company patented it, but maybe we'll do a knockoff one day. But yeah, no, we live in the United Corporations of America. We don't actually have a government. We have a multi-trillion-dollar corporate conglomerate masquerading as a government. Warren Buffett, who, corporate media like to basically give rhetorical blowjobs to every day, excuse my French, owns most of the rail industry, and he has fought every step of the way against tighter regulation, against spending money on further investment, updating equipment. Let's not forget Biden and Republicans blocked workers from going on strike. And part of why railroad workers wanted to go on strike at the end of last year, in addition to the paid sick leave days, which, by the way, Bernie right now is in the Senate. It's not going to go anywhere, but trying to, after the fact, demand that they get paid.
Would have been good to do that before, but
right. A day late.
Yeah.
But not only were they wanting to go on strike because of the lack of paid sick time, but the whole workforce had been hollowed out over the last 10 years. I think like 30% between forced retirements and laying off workers. And workers were saying, I interviewed workers who were literally working 30-hour shifts with not enough crew on trains carrying vinyl chloride, with breaks from the Civil War.
Right.
And part of what they were fighting was the faulty equipment, old trains, insufficient staff, and labor Joe, union man Joe Biden over there, who the media has propagandized that this is a friend of the worker. He blocked them from going on strike, before the midterm elections for political reasons, and then before the holidays so that we could, keep propping up this fantasy that the economy is doing dandy. So not to say if they would have been able to go on strike, that would have stopped this. But at least we probably would have heard more about the unsafe conditions.
Or we'd at least be on the way to putting in some new regulations, or there'd be a debate ahead of this tragedy. There would have been a debate at least about like, hey, maybe using this technology that was developed in the 1800s should be updated.
Right.
But, yeah.
Well, we might have heard in a response.
But I have to say we're capitalist. And that's just the way it is. But I have to say we're capitalist. And that's just the way it is.
Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, man.
Yep.
Enough is enough.
Just had to get that rotation in. So yeah, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Not that I'm certainly not Aaron Brockovich, but it ain't my first rodeo. Here's what's going to happen. Kudos to the media who's starting to cover this. Maybe they were looking at my Twitter. 3 days ago, I said, this is the biggest media blackout I've seen. And most of the stories I cover are all media blackouts. I hadn't seen one thing mentioned on any of the Sunday shows Sunday morning. They were talking about the spy balloons. I didn't see anything Monday on CNN or MSNBC. I saw a couple written articles, and then maybe they got the memo like, oh shit, we're getting criticized here. So finally CNN started covering it, MSNBC. My guess, what is today? Wednesday. Yeah. My guess is they'll stay there for a couple more days. Then they're going to leave. Right. We'll get some bullshit testing on the air is fine. And the soil is fine. And maybe the water is contaminated a little bit. And we're going to continue doing testing. And then magically the testing is going to show the water levels are improving over the next 6 months to a year. And we're basically going to have, sorry to say, if you're watching from East Palestine or the surrounding areas, court battle for the next 10, 15 years. And as Aaron Brockovich said, the residents are basically going to have to do the job of the government and the corporations and become citizen experts and activists. I know Flint residents who used to be band managers who have become experts on lead and Legionella and volatile organic compounds, and that's unfortunately what you're going to have to do there, because we just saw them do this with COVID. I mean, they basically got together, the media and the government, to say pandemic over. It's acceptable to have 3,000 people die a week. It's acceptable to have millions of people out of work, disabled from long COVID, and we just got to go back to work. No mitigation, no nothing. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be the same thing here. And I think the critical part here that Norfolk Southern, part of why they bailed out, because they didn't want to answer this question tonight. And probably the EPA and the state of Ohio EPA. Critical question here is who is categorized as a victim? And that is going to be a very narrow question in terms of miles next to this explosion, because the company is going to try and narrow it down to like, you know, a couple hundred yards. And the state EPA, they don't have the funds, the will, or the desire to be testing, you know, 100, 150 miles west or east. And, you know, a class action lawsuit with 5,000 people, that's how many people live in East Palestine, is a little bit less of a burden financially than a class action lawsuit with potentially hundreds of thousands of people.
Right.
So, yeah, unfortunately, this will not be a news story anymore. Maybe locally it will be. But in my experience, I don't know about you, when you were in Mississippi covering the water crisis, generally the local news, unless it's independent outlets, they just regurgitate whatever the state agencies say or the corporations.
That happens. I mean, it definitely was happening in Jackson. I see it happen all the time whenever, I mean, here in Austin, when I'll look and see what the local news is talking about, and they literally take like, here's the police report and here's the news story. And you could almost freaking copy paste from the police report into the thing. And they didn't talk to a single person who saw what happened or lived through what happened. It's just copy paste. And obviously there's exceptions to the rule, right? But it's yeah, I mean, in Jackson, certainly you're right. I'm sure you've seen it all over in other places. I definitely want to credit a lot of the folks in the area around East Palestine, though, because I feel like in addition to folks like us and other, you know, a couple independent outlets trying to get this out there, the like kind of like citizen journalism, if you will, popping up. I mean, when I was going through TikTok, I was seeing like, you know, moms who were out like posting like here's the pictures of the fish that are all dead everywhere. Like, I'm looking and showing you this stuff right away as it happens. Here's the giant plumes of smoke. This is what it smells like. And like when I got a text yesterday from my dad who was watching Fox News, and he was like, oh, they just interviewed this guy from, because I told him about this a week ago and he hadn't heard about it, of course. Because
wait, let me reenact last night.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, what's up? Put on Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson's covering the train explosion. I said, oh yeah, what's he talking about? I don't know, but it's really good. Put on Tucker Carlson right away.
That's basically that's pretty good. Yeah. I think
it was
Jesse Waters, though. I will say
Tucker Carlson, in my view, is a white supremacist, a phony baloney. He's not a populist. I think he's an heir of like the Swanson
I don't know.
money. He's a total bullshit artist, an anti-Semite, great replacement theory bullshit. He's pushed a lot of COVID nonsense. So I'm not a fan of COVID. I'm not a fan of Tucker Carlson.
Right.
I would go on, but I would not be like, yes, Tucker, like Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, and the rest of the sycophants. But actually the segment was pretty decent. And he did call out the EPA. He did call out the company, did call out the Ohio governor. It wasn't all like, this is Biden's fault. Because this is way past Joe Biden. Frankly, actually, Obama pushed a regulation that might have stopped this. Trump repealed it. This is bigger than all that. This is the system. Corporate capture has captured our government. Notice, Zaina's working on this story for us, but notice that the highest recipients of money from Norfolk Southern are either quiet about this or kind of not criticizing the company, including Chantel Brown, the congresswoman from Cleveland who beat Nina Turner. Surprisingly, I think she has said something, but it has not been critical of Norfolk Southern. She got $7,500, so kind of pennies, but enough to shut her up, basically, because that's how it works.
For sure. I mean, with Tucker, even a broken clock is right twice a day. But you know, the point I was trying to make, though, is that like Fox News is pulling these people on from TikTok, not from they had someone there going to cover this story. They're like, holy shit, you know, this is actually blowing up online. We're not talking about it. And they probably looked at it as, oh, there's probably some money we can make. We can bump our viewership because this is actually a good story, even though we were going to ignore it for a while. But to your point earlier, they'll be done by the end of the week for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, yeah. And you want to know something? Honestly, not at all. This is not like, hey, pat us on the back. I've probably done more than most of the corporate media combined in 3 days, and I'm not even there.
Right.
I want to stay married, so I can't really go to a toxic chemical shower with a 3-month-old.
Mhm.
But and that's just from effort, like getting into the Facebook pages. There's a couple Facebook pages that I've tried to get into, reaching out to residents who are very busy. So you just take who you could get. Reaching out, we've reached out to a bunch of toxicologists and other experts to try and, it's not just vinyl chloride, by the way. So we're trying to find out what other chemicals were on that train. What are the long-term effects? Animals, humans. I just got a message from a business. So if you actually make the effort as a journalist, you could speak with these people. And obviously then when you're on the ground, that's a whole nother element. So stuff like this needs to be covered. And I'm sure you've felt this too. It's kind of tough. We would like, as independent journalists, to kind of be octopuses and stretch our tentacles to 10 communities at one time if you can. I've been criticized. Oh, you only cover Flint. It's like, well, Flint is like 10 jobs in its own. I'd like to get on my broom and cover every community.
It's hard to stay on top of everything when you're like, you got to look at it from the perspective of like the resources. I mean, we've got a great group of people working on Status Coup stuff, but like the resources we have compared to the resources that CNN has, and the job that CNN has done covering the story versus the job that we have done, it's pretty dramatically different. We're doing a much better job with a much smaller team and a lot less resources, in my opinion. They have more people so they can reach out in more of these places, but even with those resources, they waste a lot of them. It's imagine if we had the money that CNN has to be able to get out and do this sort of stuff.
And by the way, if I was interviewing the Ohio governor, first question I would have asked, why is it you sent those people home while you're doing the testing?
Wait,
isn't the whole point of testing that you don't know the answer? So why are these people sent home?
Right. Yeah, why you wouldn't want to do what Don Lemon did and start by saying, "I'm so sorry that this is happening to you." It's not happening to him. He doesn't live in this town. It's happening. Exactly. You should be. I'm so sorry for the residents that are having to go through this. What are you doing to fix this problem for them?
Right. And by the way, they don't know because they're not talking to residents. No. But the mother that I interviewed yesterday with the son who was projectile vomiting told me DeWine was there. The governor of Ohio was there. After the train fire, because remember, there was a gap for 2 or 3 days between the fire and the controlled explosion, or as a hazardous chemical expert said, they nuked the town.
Right.
He got the hell out of there right after the controlled release.
Right.
So the wealthy governor, he got out of there. Most of the residents did not. Mm-hmm. So, and by the way,
but in his words, the air is fine. The water is fine.
And by the way, I think it was Zaina who found out from a resident. So there's, I guess, an area where you're supposed to go and hand in your receipts to Norfolk Southern to get reimbursed for if you're at a hotel or wherever it is. And they're now asking for your social security card and all this crazy shit. So some people got turned away who didn't have it.
Right.
So, I mean, this is just, it's absolutely insane. CNN, for the most part, most of the coverage I see is already on the horse race of the Republican 2024 race and Nikki Haley announcing.
You're not excited about Nikki Haley?
I'm very excited. I do like Charleston, so I do like good barbecue. No, she's running for vice president, clearly. MSNBC was covering the Georgia Trump investigation because apparently, the investigation into Trump, and he was on the phone, find me 11,000 more votes because apparently something's happening with that. I don't know. Call me naive or call me just an old school dinosaur. I think a chemical mushroom cloud in the heartland of America should be the leading story on most newscasts. Yes. But then again, you covered Uvalde for us.
Mm-hmm.
How long did that go on? 2 weeks before they moved on?
Yeah, I mean, maybe 2 weeks. I don't know. Yeah. And I mean, here in the state of Texas, zero new legislation after it, where the legislation is in session right now. And Texas is like a weird system where you go every other year. Nothing. And there won't be anything. There's not going to be anything.
So,
yeah.
So anyway, folks, Lewis interviewed a resident from East Palestine. We'll air that tomorrow. We have other content we haven't aired yet. We are also behind the scenes talking The truth is, we want to send somebody, but, in journalism, there's different kinds of risks. So if I'm going to Standing Rock, I know there's a good risk that like shots will be near me. Hopefully not real bullets. I got hit with a rubber bullet in my calf and it fucking hurt. Thankfully, it wasn't a real bullet, but rubber bullets could hurt too. But in those cases, you just kind of got to have eyes everywhere and just be as careful as you can. It's a different story when you're going into somewhere where it has nothing to do about being careful. It's you're walking into a chemical rain shower. Mm-hmm. So we were going to send Lewis over the weekend, and then I slept on it, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to send somebody into somewhere that I don't know if it's going to cause long-term health effects for that person. So I definitely respect journalists that are there right now. We will probably somebody, Lewis, maybe myself or somebody will be on the ground, but we figured, you know what, let it be for a while. We'll cover it. And we'll go. I'd rather go on the ground when most of the cameras leave, because unfortunately that is when the cover up begins. Yep. And that is when residents are feeling like they've been deserted on an island. So we'll be sending somebody probably in the next few days. And yeah, it's a tough story because it's not in one area. I mean, you're going to be driving around just trying to find people affected, and a lot of it's needle in a haystack. Yep. Looking in Facebook groups and all this. I just found Therese an hour before I went live, just looking in Facebook groups and reaching out, who was having these problems 15 miles away. So any parting thoughts, Lou?
Yeah, I mean, it should be being covered way more if we'll see tonight with the public meeting or town hall, as they're calling it. If anything kind of pops up from that, I'm sure we'll be ready to talk about it. And if we get some more clear answers as to like what the actual test results are, I mean, definitely consider becoming a member to help make the trip for myself or somebody else to get out there for this story.
Don't consider becoming a member.
Do it.
Lewis is like a little teddy bear. Look at him. So Lewis is telling you, if you have $5 to $10 a month, tell him, Lewis, we need your help.
Yeah,
because it's not cheap to send people out.
And I mean, getting rental cars, hotels. Unfortunately, I can't do this for free. I'm not made of money over here. So we gotta be able to make sure that everybody behind the scenes. Oh, he is cute. There we go. That's nice. Thank you, Marcy. I wasn't ready for that. I don't know.
He does need to eat a little more, though.
I probably could.
Very concerned. He weighs 110 pounds, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, seriously though, this stuff is really important. So if you've got the money, definitely become a member. $5 to $10 a month. If you have specific things, if you're on the ground there, you live in the area, and you want to be interviewed either remotely, like we did here today, or if I do get out there in the next couple of days or so, and you want to show me around and talk on camera, we'd love to chat with you. And
absolutely. Thank you, sir. And definitely remember, folks, Lewis, as far as I can tell, did the most work on the Jackson water crisis, which is still ongoing. So he's definitely familiar with these environmental calamities.
And I'll add, I'd like to get back to Jackson at some point too. And membership is something that can make that happen and keep that story in the forefront, because the federal government, when they passed money to give to Jackson, they added in $600 million or so, which is, generally speaking, depending on the estimate you look at, less than half of what the cost of actually fixing the problem there is. It's like, slapping some duct tape on the bottom of a bathtub with a giant hole in it. That's not going to solve the problem. So if you want to see on the ground reporting in Ohio, if you want to see more on the ground reporting in Jackson, other places, the only way on how to do it is membership, donations, that sort of thing.
And Chris Garrett, OG of Status Coup, says $5. More important to cover the cover up when the other cameras leave. We need Status Coup to stay on this like a pit bull. Absolutely. You are correct, Steve. You are correct, Chris. And I'll say the truth is, I'm not going to trust the arsonist who burned down the house to help me rebuild it. So I don't particularly want to hear from Norfolk Southern. They're in cover your ass mode right now and just trying to keep it in the hundreds of millions if they can, instead of billions. And the EPA, like I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but look at what the CDC has done. They have pushed a land of make-believe with their fake maps in terms of COVID. I mean, Walgreens has a more accurate map in terms of airborne transmission of COVID than the CDC, which is the Capitalist Defense Center. EPA, I know for a fact, knew that the Michigan Health Department and the Michigan Environmental Department were cheating on the water testing in Flint to get artificially lower lead levels. And when I called them on it, they basically told me, yeah, they're not testing the right way. On the record, they told me that, but didn't do anything about it. Because it's all the MO of these agencies is kind of do the bare minimum, move on to the next thing, sweep it under the rug.
Yep.
And if you're an indigenous person, you know what I'm talking about, because you have been in the bullseye of all this corporate industrial pollution, whether it's fracking, mining, all sorts of terrible stuff. If you're a black person, a brown person, or even a poor white person, they are dumping these plants are dumping their waste near you. These mines, these pipelines, it's all falling on the backs of the poor. And by the way, if this train thing happened in the heart of Austin or LA or nice part of New York City or a good gentrified part of Chicago, you better believe a federal disaster would be declared.
We'd have a lot of answers already. We'd have, yeah.
So thank you, Status Lou. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll talk in a little bit.
Sounds good.
And thank everybody for watching today. Got a lot of great information between, if you came late, the image we showed. If you could put that back up one more time, Colin. This was from a workplace right outside, right next to where the train explosion happened. So that picture was taken yesterday. And that brown ring was not, let me repeat, was not there before the train explosion. And I was told by a worker, the water literally looks white and smells like wet dog. So yeah, that's picture taken yesterday. That brown ring was not there before this train explosion. I'm glad we had the former chief of staff of OSHA on to talk a little bit more about vinyl chloride. And of course, Therese, who lives in Poland, Ohio, 15 miles away, describing her symptoms. So we're trying to cover as much as humanly possible as we can. Let me read more super chats, and you can sign up as a member. So don't forget about membership. Danny, $5 super sticker. Thank you, Danny. Appreciate it. Das Bosch Fleiss, €5.99. Judge Dredd comes into mind where the U.S. is a wasteland besides some mega cities. Leave it to corporations to turn movies into reality. Honestly, reality is becoming more horrible than even the worst of these horror movies. Thank you, Das Bosch. Danny, absolutely nationalize the railways and the airlines and the healthcare system, among other things. Yes. Matt, your journalistic talent and integrity shined in HIW. You conducted that interview. Oh, how you conducted that interview. Why, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I do my best to jam a lot of information and make the interviews both informative and, entertaining and more authentic and real than the softball propaganda you get on CNN, MSNBC, and from New York Times, Washington Post. Peter, $5. Great work, Jordan. Thank you. Thank you. The Clincher Live, Status Coup. Good to see you're covering this story. Absolutely. Somebody's got to. And, other independent outlets have been also, which is good to see. Ethan, $2. Nationalize transportation. Don't just nationalize transportation. Make it free. Buses should be free in America. Subways should be free in America. Trains should be free in America. They should be free. Part of being a citizen, or even, not necessarily just a citizen, but that should be part of your right to have transportation. And you would have a huge boom to the economy if people didn't have to spend hundreds of dollars a month on buses, trains, etc. Ray J, I'm hearing pollutants are moving 1 mile per hour down the river. Email me. what your source on that is. info@statuscoup.com, info@statuscoup. And we'll read this one again. Chris Garrett, $5. It's more important to cover the cover up when the other cameras leave. We need Status Coup to stay on this like a pit bull. Couldn't agree more. And we will. Trying to do my best on absolutely no sleep. I'll tell you what, for those of you who have newborns or have had newborns, yeah, there's no way of preparing for this. I would do anything to have 7 hours of sleep straight, just 7. I would do anything. Love my daughter, love her to pieces. 3 months old, but yeah, I'm running on fumes, and my wife more so because she's doing way more than I am. Anyway, I digress. Thank you so much for watching. We will have updates as we get them. Make sure you're following us on Twitter because a lot of the news we break it first on our Twitter. That's @StatusCoup. We'll have, hopefully some video and other stuff from the town hall that's happening in East Palestine tonight. Also, make sure you follow us on our Substack. You could sign up to our Substack for free. That's statuscoup.substack.com. We also post original reporting there. Zaina is going to be posting a Substack article probably tomorrow about the politicians that have taken money from Norfolk Southern. So be on the lookout for that. And this is also a good way, our Substack, to get notified before we're going live, because we usually post on Substack before we go live. And one more time, I am not asking, I am pretty much begging. If you can, if you got $5 to $10 a month, sign up as a Status Coup member. We need you. On the ground reporting is expensive. So is having freelancers to go places. So is having freelancers to host shows in studio. So if you can become a member for $5 to $10 a month, it makes a huge difference. And we're probably going to do our monthly members call next week. That's through Zoom. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a good night.